Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Well, delays in getting breast cancer screening can mean patients wait months. Reporter Michelle Gusub will tell us more, and you can call in and share what's it like for you accessing breast cancer screening or treatment. In half an hour, more response to short-term rental rules coming this May. Victoria's mayor wants a delay until the fall to let owners have one more tourist summer. How would the restrictions change things for you? I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on the CBC News app, cbc.ca/BC, and on YouTube on CBC Vancouver's page. Well, CBC reporter Michelle Gusub has been investigating this news that wait times have increased for diagnostic mammograms in the province. Gusub spoke with BC doctors and patients about their concerns, including having to wait 6 months or more for a test. We're going to hear more from Michelle in just a moment. We'll also be joined by Dr. Paula Gordon to answer your questions later on in the program. We're asking you on the open line, what is your experience with accessing breast cancer screening or treatment? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. And CBC reporter Michelle Gusub joins me now in studio. Hello.
Hi.
Thanks so much for this reporting. What were the concerns that you found?
Yeah, so we heard from one patient. She's a woman in her early 50s, and she has 5 women in her family who have been diagnosed with breast cancer. She also has very dense breasts, which puts her at a higher risk for breast cancer, and she has a history of lumps being found in her breast. So this is someone who obviously is at very high risk, and for that reason, for the past 15 years, since her mid-30s, she's been getting screened. Every 6 months, she goes in for a screening or diagnostic mammogram.
Okay.
And she was due, she was due for her last appointment in December, or in October rather. But she was told she couldn't get in until December. She thought, okay, couple months wait, that's okay. Then now she's due for her next one in June, and she's told the next one isn't available until next December. So now she's waiting a full year to get her follow-up test when she's supposed to be in every 6 months.
Wow.
So she wrote into us, said, this is very concerning to me, what's going on here? And we started looking into it. And what we found is that, women or patients are facing longer and longer wait times to get those diagnostic mammograms. And we're not talking about mammograms that people go in to get screened, just to check up, make sure everything's okay. These are people that are either at high risk or there's already been something identified in their breast that is of concern. So they're already facing a lot of anxiety and then having to wait longer to find out more information.
There's a reason why they're taking that extra step.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, you spoke with the patient. You also spoke with a doctor at West Coast Women's Clinic. And here's a clip now of Dr. Dedesha Holowenko.
I've had patients where I've done an exam, found a lump, looking for a diagnostic mammogram, and having to phone or get my staff to phone 3 or 4 different locations to get a reasonable time, because the first appointment that we're given is 6 months later, and this is with a palpable lump. So it's very, very difficult.
So what does that mean if it's hard to even get information on wait times?
Yeah, I mean, we know, especially with cancer, early detection is very key in people getting the treatment that they need. So this is of concern. We're trying to figure out what is behind these delays.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we hear about backlogs in the healthcare system across many different things, but specifically for breast imaging, what we're hearing is that there's really a shortage of radiologists and breast imaging technologists right across the province, no matter where you are. Another thing is that the screening and diagnostic programs aren't synced with each other. And so it can be really complicated to navigate what kind of test you need. And that puts a lot of onus on patients and their family doctors. What do we know about family doctors in BC? There's there's a shortage of those as well.
Right. I mean, it's hard to imagine that these two systems, screening and diagnostic, which should be working together, are not linked.
Yeah, and there are calls for the system to be more streamlined in the way that MRIs have become streamlined. Another thing we're hearing about is financial strain on publicly funded clinics, some of them not even updating their mammogram equipment because they just don't have the funds. So there are a lot of pressure points in the system. And then, of course, pandemic created a backlog, and they're still trying to clear that.
Okay. So what does the province say at this point about it then?
So we've been asking the province, do you have information about just how long people are waiting? We're hearing 6 months, we're hearing longer than that, shorter than that, as you heard from that doctor calling around, trying to find, even a cancellation to get someone in on time. The BC Radiological Society says they are working with the province. The province is very aware of these problems, but we haven't heard a response from the province yet specifically on what those wait times look like, if they have data. And it also varies depending on where you are in the province. So what we're hearing is, in the Lower Mainland, you may have more access. You may be able to get in a bit quicker. If you're in the interior on the island, you're going to face a longer wait time.
Okay, that urban-rural divide once again. I know that you heard from Marlise Dawson, who initially wrote to you. Have you been hearing from other women since you reported on this initially?
Yeah, I heard from one woman. She's an RN. Her mother died of breast cancer. Now her daughter has found a lump in her breast, and her daughter's had a really hard time getting an appointment. She doesn't have a family doctor. Also getting emails from radiologists saying, this has been a concern for a long time. We've been raising concerns around this for a long time. Another issue, Michelle, is that there has been a change since 2018 in this province. So in 2018, they started providing more information for women about breast density on their mammograms. And doctors say, this is fantastic. People have more health information. Family doctors have more information about their patients. And if you have dense breasts, you are at higher risk because it's more difficult to identify potential problems on a mammogram. So people with high breast density then are eligible for more screening. So all of a sudden, more people who are getting that result on their mammogram are getting more screening. That's a good thing, but it's putting more strain on a system that is already stretched for all the reasons that we've listed.
Right, more information, which is a good thing, but that leads to more demand and a system that can't quite keep up. Michelle, thank you very much.
Thanks, Michelle.
CBC reporter Michelle Gusub. And you can let us know as well if you'd like to share what's it been like for you to access breast cancer screening. If you're someone who's had to move toward that diagnostic screening, for example, that second step, or if you've been flagged somehow for further screening, what has that wait been like? What's it been like trying to get an appointment? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Well, joining me now is Dr. Paula Gordon. And as we ask you to join us on the open line, Dr. Gordon is here to take your calls as well. Dr. Gordon, good afternoon. And Dr. Paula Gordon is a clinical professor at UBC's Department of Radiology and the volunteer medical advisor to Dense Breasts Canada. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you.
What goes through your mind hearing, these kinds of stories of people finding it's hard to find an appointment, it's getting delayed up to a year? What do you think of that?
Well, I think a year's a bit much, and I even would question the person who said it was going to be 6 months. You correctly said it depends where you are, but in preparation for speaking to you, I just asked our booking clerk if somebody called today and asked for a diagnostic mammogram, not even saying that there was something highly suspicious or anything like that, when's our next available appointment? And it's May the 8th. So that's still unacceptably long for somebody who's got a lump in their breast, but that's 6 weeks. That's not 6 months. Even you, Michelle, perpetuated some confusion in the words we use. You said diagnostic screening. Well, diagnosis and screening are two different things. I think you meant diagnostic testing after. Okay, because the word screening means somebody who has no problems. She has no lumps and her screening mammogram is negative. And then she's in the screening stream. Diagnostic is different. A woman who has an abnormal screening mammogram then needs diagnostic testing, or a woman who has a lump in her breast needs diagnostic testing, and the waits are too long. There's no wait at all for a diagnostic. Sorry, I'm doing it myself. There's no wait at all for a screening mammogram. There are ridiculous waits for screening breast ultrasound for women with dense breasts, and that's because not enough clinics are offering them. And I'm sorry to say that's just because the reimbursement is not there. The
Okay, so
funding
it's,
that
pardon me.
go ahead.
I appreciate your clarifying the terms there. So screening and diagnostic testing is what you would be moved toward should that screening show something that
Correct.
you need further monitoring. Okay, thank you very much for that. And as you say, the first appointment you've seen is May 8th. We did receive this email, and we've been featuring this woman who has said she can't get an appointment until December, which from her last appointment would have been a long time. What's the risk to these long waits?
So the risk, of course, is that somebody's got cancer and we're not going to find it as early as we would like to. And with some cancers, they grow so slowly, a couple of months isn't going to make a difference. But especially in younger women, when they do get cancer, it grows faster. And we want to find them as soon as possible. We want to get all the tests done so they can get started on their treatment. And the wait times are unacceptably long. We predicted, honestly, decades ago that this was going to happen. But the ministry, the university, the powers that be that could have done something to improve the situation did not. And now we're in a really deep hole. It's not just about money. Even if they threw tons of money at this problem, there are not enough trained subspecialists. So the average radiologist who finishes a residency can go to work and be a jack of all trades. But to do the higher level testing, you need to do what's called a fellowship. And radiologists lost interest. There was a fellowship program, but radiologists stopped applying for it because the reimbursement, I'm sorry, it's money again, is so inappropriate. They don't want to do
Why is
breast
it
imaging when they've
inappropriate?
been for training.
Why is it
Because
inappropriate?
it doesn't cover the overhead costs. To run a business with, and most of the, okay, let's step back. I know of no other city in Canada, probably in the States, where the major teaching hospitals, there are 3 in Vancouver, there's Vancouver General, St. Paul's, and UBC Hospital, do no breast imaging. There's never been a mammogram machine at VGH. They used to have them at St. Paul's and UBC, but they got rid of them years and years ago. And most of the breast imaging in Vancouver is done at community clinics, where the radiologists have to pay all their overhead. They pay their rent, they buy the equipment, they pay the staff, and the fees that are paid for women's imaging have never kept up with the real overhead. And it's gotten to the point where even the places that do it often don't do the maximum because they need to do the other tests that pay better, that are going to pay the bills.
We have some calls waiting on the line now as we ask people to call us and let us know what's it been like for you trying to access breast cancer screening. Lisa has been waiting in Vancouver. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, are you able to hear me well?
We sure can. Go ahead. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate, very glad I caught this story because I've been meaning to talk to someone about it. My family has been dealing with cancer in the last year. My dad had colon cancer, my mom had breast cancer, and luckily she's done her chemo and everything. But I'm a healthcare worker in Vancouver, and it's been hard for us to navigate the system, which is crazy.
Even as a healthcare worker. Yeah.
Yeah. My mom was one of the people that, well, she didn't have to go to Bellingham, thankfully. She's not able to do that, but I don't know if that's something you guys have talked about yet, that people are being sent to Bellingham for radiation treatment.
Right.
Which is incredibly expensive. And like the person just before me was saying, that we predicted this so long ago, haven't built new facilities, and here we are sending people for probably tens of thousands of dollars each, just given what I know about how much hospital care costs here, to the United States. And I just can't believe that. I would really like some numbers and stats on the cost of that. And also, it's such a strain on people who are going through cancer treatment.
Right. What's it been like trying to get
country.
get screening for your mother or anyone else in your family?
Well, for me, I'm waiting for genetic testing, and I'd like to get full testing as well, given my family history. And I am still in the process of doing that. I applied for that, 6 months ago, a referral through my doctor, and I'm still waiting. And I think they said about a year for that appointment. So that's stressful, and my sisters also probably should get that as well, but haven't been referred. So yeah, the testing is obviously abysmal, as you guys have been talking about.
Okay, and so this is genetic testing that you're seeking, right?
Yeah, because of my family history.
Fair, yeah, and that's a laudable step that you're taking there. Lisa, thank you so much. That's a difficult time you've been going through with both your parents dealing with illness.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
I just wanted to add one more thing.
Yes, of course.
When we're talking about the shortage of healthcare workers, well, first of all, I've been off work for 3 years from burnout from COVID, and several of my colleagues as well have been off for several years. And I think we need to do more for retention than we do to train more new grads, because we're just pumping them into a system that can't support them.
Thank you very much. Certainly something we've heard from healthcare workers, and you've been off for 3 years now.
Yeah,
from burnout. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Lisa, really appreciate hearing from you. You've raised so many issues.
Yeah,
thank you. That's Lisa in Vancouver. All the best to you. Dr. Gordon, yes. Okay, so this particular screening, you want to be specific as well, absolutely, as you suggested earlier, is genetic screening she's seeking because of her family history. What is how are you going to qualify for that? I guess what qualifies someone for that testing, and what are the typical weights?
So first of all, that's beyond my expertise, but I will tell you there is a hereditary cancer program at BC Cancer that a family doctor can refer a patient to. But they fill out a long form, which is then reviewed by one of the genetic counselors. And the wait time to be seen in clinic used to be 18 months. I don't know what it is now. It can't possibly be any shorter. And then the woman comes in and gets counseled, and then if she falls into the right category, then she's offered the actual blood test to look to see if she has one of the breast cancer genes.
Is that something you would recommend people do, given, if there's someone in their family who's been diagnosed with breast cancer?
Typically, it's if there's more than one person in the family, multiple generations, or multiple people in the same generation. It's not just a woman with a mother or sister with breast cancer would not qualify for genetic testing. Now, if a woman has a first-degree relative, a mother or sister, who is known to be positive for the breast cancer gene, then she could get tested.
Okay.
But if a woman's mother, for example, has had breast cancer and has not been tested, that alone would not get her genetic testing.
Okay. Really glad to have you to go through these particular details, because information is so important, right? Claire wrote us an email. I had a clear mammogram in 2018, just before breast density was being reported to women. In 2019, I found my own lump. I saw my family doctor within a month. I was booked for a diagnostic mammogram within 6 weeks. Only by luck, my diagnostic mammogram was done in a place where the radiologist and technologist decided I could have an ultrasound immediately. And then upon looking at the ultrasound, I received the biopsy procedure immediately as well. But the 2+ month wait for surgery was excruciating. While I waited for surgery, I discovered the weak points in BC's breast diagnostic imaging. This led to my decision for a double mastectomy and immediate reconstruction. No regrets. And thanks as well to Paula Gordon. I've met her and admire her work to improve women's health across Canada. There you have it. Thank you very much for that email, Claire. Our next caller now is Mary, joining us from Vancouver. Mary, what's access to screening been like for you? Hi, Mary. Can you hear me? Looks like we're not connected to Mary in Vancouver. Ruth in Salmon Arm, go ahead, please. What are your thoughts on breast cancer screening and increasing weights? Hi there, Ruth. Can you hear me? We seem to be having trouble with some of our phone connections here. Let's try.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Ruth, go ahead.
Hi. So I'm from Salmon Arm, and I'm a just in the nick of time, good news story. I found a lump in my breast. I went to see my doctor, and within 4 days, I was getting diagnostic testing in the form of a diagnostic mammogram and a diagnostic ultrasound. And this was because I was one of the first patients to take advantage of a brand new breast diagnostic center and screening center in our local hospital, Shoe Salt Lake Hospital in Salmon Arm.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and then after I had my ultrasound, I was offered a biopsy within a week, but I caught COVID, so that got delayed a little bit. But anyways, I can't say enough for how important this kind of diagnostic and screening. I haven't had problems with screening, but just getting the diagnostics done and avoiding delays. For me, it was in the nick of time. I was able to get my treatment. I do not have to go on. I was early enough not to have to go on and do toxic treatments like radiation and chemotherapy.
I can hear the relief in your voice, Ruth, and so glad. And we're going to follow up on that new screening clinic in Salmon Arm then. Thank you so much for sharing your news.
You're welcome.
Take care. All the best to you and continued good health. Dr. Gordon, so that difference between rural and urban, access that we heard about earlier, it sounds like here's a potential solution to that, new clinics. What do you think needs to be done at this point?
Well, it was also a matter of timing for her. She said the clinic had just opened, so clearly they weren't fully
Right.
booked up. It would be interesting to know what their wait times are now. But otherwise, I'm glad you're letting all the women in Vancouver know they should be going to Salmon Arm. Yeah, we need more places doing the work. Absolutely, more places in the rural areas, but even in the big city here, we need more places that have the equipment, that have the subspecialty trained radiologists. And we've got to, like I said, even if they threw all the money at it right now, we need to find those people, and we need to probably go to the level of people in medical school now who haven't even gone into the radiology programs,
Right.
and incentivize them to do breast imaging.
You touched on that as well, because you need further training on that.
Yes, but we need the technologists. We need to get more young people doing the programs that are going to lead them to careers as mammography technologists and ultrasound technologists. And we need to pay them well enough to get them to stay.
Dr. Gordon, thank you very much. I know this is very much your life's work, so I appreciate your joining us with your expertise.
Pleasure.
Dr. Paula Gordon is a clinical professor at UBC's Department of Radiology. It is 12:28, 1:28 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today. And in other news, BC RCMP and Solicitor General Mike Farnworth says there's no evidence of widespread diversion of the province's legally prescribed substances into the illegal drug market. Now, this comes after Prince George RCMP linked safer supply to a drug seizure. And Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre commented and criticized the program. Now, here's what BC's Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, Jennifer Whiteside, had to say on that on the early edition this morning.
We use every possible intervention that we can, and of course, we have to attend to, unintended, impacts of those programs, and that's exactly what we do. We work with our health authorities. We're working with frontline clinicians. We're working with law enforcement to mitigate any sort of unintended consequences here, and putting in place programs to be able to better, support health authorities and support frontline physicians, better track what might be happening, identify whether people may be misusing prescriptions early on. But I'll also tell you this, Stephen, hydromorphone is the drug that is primarily prescribed through this program, and 86% of the hydromorphone prescribed in the province is prescribed for pain, for people with, who have cancer, seniors with arthritis, if people are getting out of hospital after surgery. So, people misusing prescriptions, or people who maybe get a hold of prescriptions that are not theirs, that happened long before and was an issue long before we had this pharmaceutical alternative program for people with severe opioid use disorder. And that will continue to be an issue that our health system and pharmacists will be grappling with, and something that pharmacists, doctors, everyone is very attuned to working towards mitigating.
It's 12:30 now, 1:30 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC, on Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming as well. You can catch us on cbc.ca/BC, or you can watch on YouTube at CBC Vancouver. I'm Michelle Elliott. Very nice to be with you this afternoon. Coming up in our next half hour, in just a few moments from now, we'll talk about short-term rental restrictions. Yes, they are scheduled to come in May, but Victoria's mayor is hoping for a delay until the fall. We'll hear more about that coming up and ask you, what would these changes mean for you? That's coming up right after the CBC News Update with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Surrey Mayor Brenda Locke says they are still talking to the province about the police transition, but the city hasn't changed its position to keep the RCMP. The province says it has presented its final offer to Surrey. Victoria had previously offered $150 million. However, Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth isn't saying what the latest offer includes. The provincial government is promising to go after major corporations that are causing harm. It's introduced a new bill called the Public Health Accountability and Cost Recovery Act. It's meant to allow the province to go after costs associated with the promotion, marketing, and distribution of products that are harmful. And school officials in New Westminster say they are dealing with an overcrowding crisis. The district says it's overcapacity by about 600 students this year, and that number is expected to more than triple in less than 15 years. And now the forecast on the north coast. Periods of rain this afternoon with a high of 6. Mainly cloudy and windy in the Peace with the highs up to 11. In the central interior, including Prince George, a high of 9 degrees and mainly cloudy. Highs to 10 with sunshine in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, mainly sunny with a high of 13. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, sunny this afternoon with highs around 12 degrees. That's your CBC News Update from Vancouver.
And a very happy Pi Day to you.
I did not know it was Pi Day.
It's March 14th. So
I love a good pie.
Yeah, I know that's the pie that everybody thinks about, but of course we're talking about 3.14.
Oh, are we?
Wait, yeah.
Oh.
Well, yes. Let me explain this all to you. No,
Sure.
I can only explain to the extent that it is Pi Day, and estimate at 3.14 the ratio of the circumference of a circle to its diameter. Mathematicians can correct me on that, but it is a big deal for people who love math, which is apparently not you and me.
Well, so how are we supposed to be celebrating Pi Day?
I think a lot of people celebrate by eating pie.
All right.
So,
Okay.
which
That
we have no problem with.
I can get on board
We
with,
can get
yeah.
on board with that. I have some fun facts for you, though. Okay. So I went and looked it up because what's the big deal with pi? It is because it's kind of a constant. So, when with math, it's the fact that these things are constant and absolute that makes it so special. But also, March 14th marks the birthday of Albert Einstein.
Okay.
So there you go. That's kind of appropriate, right? And while most people think of pi as 3.14, the actual entire ratio, because you remember that actually goes on and on and on and on,
Sure.
has not been calculated. You look so enthused by this.
No.
Here
Well, I
for the
remember pi from
content.
high school, but I mean, where does it come into play in our day-to-day life? I'm not sure.
Just on March 14th.
All right.
Every
Here we
year. We'll celebrate with a slice of pie later. Do you have a favorite?
Any fruit pie. I mean, rhubarb, raspberry. But
there.
anything's
Apple,
fine. Yeah.
Pumpkin
sure.
even. Rob, thank you.
Sure.
Happy Pie Day.
Thank you.
Right now, Victoria City Council is meeting, and one item on the agenda today is a motion to ask the provincial government to hold off on its new restrictions placing limits on short-term rentals. Now, the new rules are set to start in May. And they would mean you can only rent on Airbnb or other short-term rental platforms if that unit is in your primary residence or otherwise on the same property. Victoria Mayor Marianne Alto says delaying the new rules until the fall would give short-term rental owners in Victoria a chance for one more high tourist season. Now, the mayor couldn't join us today, but earlier I spoke with Orion Rogers, who's a spokesperson for the Property Rights Association of BC, and he supports a delay.
I think Marianne also has a very good outlook on this. She's looking for balance for her city. She recognizes that these regulations are coming in a little too quick, especially for individual owner-operators and also tourism and local business.
Okay, what impact would that have then?
I think it didn't give people enough time to plan and adjust, and for a number of reasons. One, we've just come out of a pandemic, which was unprecedented, losses and downturn for many folks, and so having a longer runway and more time frame would allow people to adjust and kind of recoup some of that.
And, Victoria obviously is a place where rents have been rising. Housing is incredibly tight and is a big issue there. I mean, how far would these rules go toward alleviating that housing crunch and allowing for more rentals for people there?
The 634 licensed operators in the downtown core, I don't think were negatively impacting housing. These are condos that are very high priced, very expensive. So whether they were to be purchased and lived in and or rented long term, they would be expensive regardless.
Do you see that as being part of the overall housing issue, though, that housing units are being used as investment rather than as a place to live?
That's a good question. I think the biggest concern here is that more housing needs to be procured and built instead of having properties taken away from folks.
Yeah, can you expand on that?
Well, I think that if we use thoughtful legislation, taxation, and regulation, we could then generate more revenues like the Victoria Housing Fund or Victoria Housing Reserve Fund, where it was collecting revenues from short-term rentals and putting it into affordable housing projects. I think that is a better vehicle for creating more housing as opposed to taking away, hardworking middle-class folks' retirement funds that they purchased these properties with.
And so what do you hope comes from Mayor Alto's motion?
Well, a number of things. I mean, I think the biggest is just a longer runway for people to plan, for people to adjust and feel this impact that's about to come. It also would give more opportunity for, conversations with the province and to provide more nuanced data and nuanced approach to come up with a fair and more balanced policy.
Orion Rogers is a spokesperson for the Property Rights Association of BC. Well, we're asking you, as we see the reaction from Victoria, we're going to hear about Tofino in a moment as well, how would the new rules on short-term rentals change things for you? We want to hear from you if you are a renter or if you're an owner. Who does rent on short-term rental platforms? We'd love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. And you can email bctoday@cbc.ca. Now, up island from Victoria, the resort community of Tofino has a different reaction to the new rules on short-term rentals. As a small tourist town, Tofino can be exempt from those restrictions. But Tofino's council wants to opt in, saying the commercialization of housing is an issue. And Tofino Mayor Dan Law spoke to Amy Bell on the Coast yesterday on CBC Radio. And the mayor said the rules would bring a level of enforcement from the province, and something he says council has been asking for years. Here's more of what he had to say.
At the end of the day, houses are being lost, homes are being lost to commercial investment. They're zoned residential, they're taxed residential. Their purpose is primarily to be a dwelling. And as we see those homes move into a commercialization, they're being run primarily as a commercial unit. And that's not only, it's a problem in Tofino. Certainly our median value homes have gone up from just over 500,000 to 1.6 million in 7 years. We've seen the loss of homes. We've seen the housing pressure increase. Businesses are closing because they can't get housing for their employees. we're looking forward to see what does that look like in 5 years when there's, we're struggling to find homes for nurses and teachers and doctors and other essential service workers, and what happens to a town, and then eventually, ultimately, that's what council has to look at. And in this case, council was very, it was a tough decision. It was not an easy decision, but council had the courage to come together and say, hey, we have to make tough decisions for the community as a whole. We have to look ahead and do whatever we can to fight this fight for people that have to live here, and we need to be a real town.
Well, joining me now from Tofino is Julia Payne. She operates short-term rentals in Tofino, and she wrote us to BC Today. And Julia, hello, good afternoon.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks so much for joining us and for writing in to share your perspective. And tell us a bit about yourself and why you wanted to share your story.
Well, I just think that this Bill 35, the whole thing is quite a shock to many of us. There's one part, though, that's particularly relevant to me and my family, and it doesn't really seem to be talked about as much, but it's the removal of the legal non-conforming permissions. So we have a 2-bedroom bed and breakfast in Tofino, and about 2 years ago, we decided to rezone our property to support the development of 2 family-sized lots, knowing full well throughout the process that in order to be supported by the district staff and council, we would need to remove our short-term rental permissions. So we did. And, not without due diligence, though, we knew that our rights to continue to operate would be protected under provincial law, under the legal non-conforming clause.
Okay.
However, needless to say, very shortly after our rezoning was completed, only a matter of days, in fact, we were made aware that the province was removing those rights with Bill 35 beginning May 1st. So that's not really a lot of time for us to kind of shift the direction of our future, And I think, like, above just our personal story, I worry about this setting a precedent that shows our governments that whenever 1 or 2 policymakers have a strong opinion about something, that they have the ability to just strip us of our rights without any public consultation. I'm not really sure where that will stop if we allow that to happen. And that alone seems like a pretty scary thought.
Okay. And so just to be clear then, this legal non-conforming category essentially would have enabled you to continue with short-term rentals, but that's been removed with this bill coming in May. What do you make of what you heard? Well, first of all, actually, can you tell me a bit more about what you do operate and, what it would mean for your family?
Yeah, well, we had the short-term rental permissions originally on this property, and then to be able to continue, we transformed it into a 2-bedroom bed and breakfast. So we have a long-term residence within the house, and 2 of the bedrooms we bed and breakfast. And we were that was the backbone of our decision to do this rezoning, is knowing that we have those rights protected. It's our family income. It's what's helping us with the financial burden of even the rezoning process alone is really high in Tofino. It's devastating. It's devastating for us.
So it sounds like with the 2 units on your property, you would still be allowed one, but not the other. Is that right?
Yeah, we'd only be allowed to do the long-term rental now that the short-term, the clause for the grandfathering is being removed.
Okay. Financially, what would that mean for you?
Well, like I said, it's devastating for us. I mean, purchasing our property in Tofino was a huge investment for us. And it wasn't one that was easy for us. It wasn't a decision that we took lightly. We worked very hard for ourselves and the future of our kids to be able to have what we have. But again, the backbone of our decision was knowing that this property came with an income.
Okay.
And so taking it from us makes our life unaffordable. And with that in mind, I'm just curious who this legislation is attempting to help at the expense of families like ours. And if the outcome will even support the intention of this bill, I just don't know.
What do you make of what your mayor just said about, what does a community look like in 5 years down the road if they don't take these steps?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that we've got a housing crisis. I agree that the housing market is outrageously high and hard to get into, but that is a global issue. I don't believe that that is created from a successful tourism economy in our town. And I don't believe that the opting in or even this legislation is going to help remedy any of that. I believe if we need more housing, we need to build more houses, not take from the people who have worked really hard to get to where they are.
Julia, thank you very much for writing into the show and for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
That's Julia Payne, who runs short-term rental units in Tofino. This is BC Today. It's 12:46, and we're asking you, how will these changes affect you, whether you are a renter or an owner? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. I'm going to go first to Sheena in Victoria. Hi, Sheena.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, thanks very much for joining. And you're in Victoria. So what do you think of your council seeking an exemption? Not an exemption, but a delay.
Well, I think I'm actually in Saanich, but I just named
Okay.
Victoria.
All right.
I'm 1 block away. But I hope Victoria does not get its exemption.
Or delay.
Or delay, yeah. Well, now having listened to the woman before me, I think I would be okay with a delay until the end of the summer.
Okay.
With the caveat that it will kick in September 1st, which also would be the time that students would arrive. So there would be more availability of apartments for them. But the short-term rental, it just has to stop. It was never intended to be a business in residential neighborhoods, a hotel business in residential neighborhoods. That was never what it was supposed to be. It just metastasized into that. And it privileges people who can afford to buy multiple properties. So everything about it is just wrong. And while I'm sorry for Julie and people like her who have made this investment, the fact is that housing is a human right. And there just isn't enough housing. And every little bit that we do will help.
Okay.
So this will add a little bit, and there has to be more and more.
Okay.
Oh, and by the way, the housing crisis, the crisis in education, infrastructure, and medicine, which you were just talking about, they are all the result of fewer transfer dollars from the feds to the provinces.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'm going to focus on the housing part of your point there. Thank you so much for the call from Saanich. Skip, hop, and a jump away from Victoria. Ed is joining us now from Kelowna. Hello.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure. What are your thoughts?
I am totally in favor of a delay. September, yes. I don't have a short-term rental. My daughter manages them. But I was just concerned. I went to City Council, Kelowna. I was listening to what their approach was. They left it sort of at the government's issue to deal with. I think the government's really taken a draconian approach. You know, they come in, they've laid this law down, and they haven't given anybody any time to sort of gather. There's going to be huge impacts on tourism, on small businesses. They should have, approached the Chamber of Commerce. They should have, had a lot more sympathy for the cities involved, and it just seems like it's being forced upon us now, and we're hurtling towards summer. Tourism is a huge impact for Kelowna, and we're going to be stuck, with a situation with a law that just basically is forced upon these small businesses.
Ed, thank you so much for calling in.
You're welcome.
Take care. Ed in Kelowna. And Tracy is joining us now, sort of nearby too, Penticton. Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for
having
calling.
me on.
Yes, sure. What are your thoughts on the changes, or what will change with the incoming short-term rental restrictions?
Well, I think it was strategic for the government to do it at this time of year rather than in the fall because those of us who work with unhoused populations call this eviction season. This is when people get kicked out of all sorts of short-term rentals, hotels, all sorts of Airbnbs that will rent to them over the winter and to make room for the tourist dollars that are coming in. But that brings up a whole other thing where, now instead of just having to figure out cold weather shelters, we need to figure out shelters when there's heat domes and when there's too much wildfire smoke and when there's these other things that are affecting the health and safety of our marginalized populations. And it's not just, people who you would think would normally be homeless. I see families living in tents and trailers and motorhomes and all of that sort of thing who have to get out of their rental for the season and then they're allowed back in when the tourists leave. So I think it was strategic to do it now, and I don't think that they should delay it.
Tracy, thank you so much for your call as well.
Thank you.
Love to hear from more of our audience too. What do you think? Whether you're a renter or an owner and operate on short-term rental platforms, if you're someone experiencing homelessness, you can give us a call. And we just heard from Tracy there who works with unhoused people. Let us know what you think will change as a result of the new restrictions on short-term rental short-term rentals in BC. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And by email as well, it's bctoday@cbc.ca. And joining me now for this conversation as well is Doug King, Executive Director of the Together Against Poverty Society in Victoria. Hello, good afternoon, Doug.
Good afternoon.
Thanks so much for joining us. What do you make of the call in Victoria from Victoria's mayor to seek a delay in these new rules?
I mean, it's something that our organization, Together Against Poverty, that provides direct support to tenants and honestly sees, firsthand some of the problems that we have in our housing market. It's not something that we support. I think the mayor here is largely making a political statement. I don't think the mayor honestly expects the provincial government to honor that request if it is made. And ultimately, I think there's an opportunity here for the mayor to try to put themselves into a bit of a centrist position, when the reality is the government fully intends to move forward on this, and I fully expect that is going to happen.
Okay, why do you think that there shouldn't be delay then?
Well, there's two reasons. I mean, first, obviously, is the reason why we're doing this in the first place. We do have an acute housing crisis. We know that there's far more people out there in crisis who are trying to find rentals, who are paying far more than they can afford on rentals than there are individuals in our province that own multiple properties, especially people who own multiple properties and use them as short-term investment properties. I think the government really is just prioritizing the needs and the interests of renters over a relatively small group in our society, and that's a normal thing to do. The most important reason, though, why the government's not going to look at a delay or shouldn't look at a delay is part of the reason why the government wants to do this is for all of these units to hit the market at the same time. One of the benefits of this change, one of the benefits of this action is to actually give those landlords, those owners, an opportunity to say, either I'm going to convert to a long-term rental and I'm going to rent it out still, or I'm going to put it on the market for sale. I think the government wants to see more houses hit the market this spring. They want to see them hit the market all at the same time, and a delay would defeat that purpose.
Something we heard from Orion Rogers is that there are people who are licensed, and then there are those who aren't, and are illegally renting out on short-term rentals. Whatever you do, what kind of rules you put in, they're the ones who cause the problems, and they will continue to do so.
Yeah, and I think one of the problems is we've really started to meld this world of home and work and business. What long time we have questioned as an organization why landlords and long-term rental landlords as well aren't licensed and require a business license, as ultimately what we're talking about is somebody's business. It's while it might be a home and a house, short-term rentals are run as a business, and this impact that the government change will make will have a business impact on these individuals. And it's also, I think, important to recognize that a lot of the times when we hear from property rights groups and investors groups, they like to style themselves or position themselves as middle-class Canadians. We know the data doesn't support that. We know that the majority of people who own multiple properties and who are renting out properties as investments or have been able to purchase properties for investments are some of the wealthiest in our society. And I think it's time that we stop pretending that was
Well,
different.
let me just bring up, Julia, who is in Tofino, and she and her family have 2 units that they rent on short-term rentals. They have, played by the rules. They are licensed, played by the rules, relying on that income for their family. And now is getting a jolt, right? A change. And so what do you say to someone like that?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that obviously the change is a loss of investment income, and the change is a loss of potential investment income. We haven't actually seen any data or anything to indicate that anyone who owns these properties and has been using them as short-term rentals is going to substantially lose money or lose that property itself. What we're really talking about here is limiting how much money they can make off it. They're still going to make money if they choose to rent it out as a long-term rental, just not as much as they would have before.
Right.
And if they purchase that property and they put themselves in a financial position where they can't support it without using it as a short-term rental, those are the units, those are the houses that the government wants to see hit the market, because that's not sustainable in a housing market for people to own property like that.
Doug King, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Doug King is Executive Director of the Together Against Poverty Society in Victoria. We have another caller on the line in Victoria to wrap here, and April joins us now. Hi, April.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks so much for calling. I just have a minute, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So, I mean, as somebody who has family and friends that use Airbnb, both as income, but both as, relying on that for their travels, I go to Vancouver every 3 weeks for work. And for me to go to Vancouver and have a reliable Airbnb source to stay at is super helpful for me and makes it more affordable for me to continue traveling. But with
not hotels.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's no way I could afford to go to Vancouver if I was staying in a hotel. Like, I pay about $110 per night, but if I stay multiple nights, it's like, ends up being less than $100 a night, basically, with all the fees and stuff like that. But more importantly, the Airbnb that I stay at now, it is in a person's primary residence, and now with that change of Airbnb,
it would still be. It would still be allowed, right, in primary residence?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
It would still be allowed, but now the prices are going up in that
I see.
too.
April,
So
I'm so sorry to jump in. I have to wrap, but I'm really glad we heard from you. Thank you so much. And Josh writes as well, no property is being taken away from owners of these short-term rentals, just required to use the property in a way more beneficial to society. Thanks so much for joining us.